Almost nothing is worse than feeling totally alone. And those of us who struggle with mental illness can feel doubly alone because first we can't talk about it, and then we think we might be crazy. Keep watching to find out what movie helped me realize I was not alone. And there are people who understand. They may be hard to find, but they're there. Hi, I'm Christine, the middle-aged fangirl. I have had depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and it was film and fandom that helped get me through. I talk about how my favorite shows pretty much saved me and the awesomeness of fandom and mental health, because those are the things that keep me alive, and maybe they can help you too. I grew up in a small town in the 1970s, and back then, nobody talked about mental illness. So when I was going through my first depression at 15, I had no reference. I didn't know it was something that was happening to me. All I knew was that the voices in my head would not shut up, not shut up. They told me I was worthless and stupid, and the world was better off without me. So I spent 3 months wandering around town, deciding what car I was going to throw myself in front of. Of course, now we have the internet. Now we can find a community that we're looking for. But back then, there was nothing, especially for a teenager who didn't drive. I was in the habit of staying up all night to watch old movies. Of course, this was before cable, so you had to stay up to watch them. One night, I stayed up to watch Night of the Iguana, a film based on a play by Tennessee Williams. Now, I am not the biggest Tennessee Williams fan. His biggest hits, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and Streetcar Named Desire, just the worldview is just so dark and depressing, and there's not a whole lot of characters I like. But I was bored, and it was something to watch. Anyway, the movie stars Richard Burton, Ava Gardner, and Deborah Carr. It's the story of 3 people stranded in a rundown rural Mexico hotel. The climax of the film happens when Shannon, played by Richard Burton, has a nervous breakdown and tries to kill himself by swimming out to sea. So the others tie him up in a hammock. Hannah Jelks, a reserved woman who up until this point we don't know much about, nurses him through his attack. Listen carefully to this scene as Hannah talks about what she calls blue devils and spooks. Today we'd call them depression and panic attacks, but back then no one other than professionals had a word for them.
Who's the person you told Maxine you'd help through a crack up like this?
Oh, that. Myself.
Oh, you?
Oh, yes. I had a spook like yours once. I just had a different name for him. I used to call him the Blue Devil. And oh, we had quite a contest between us.
Which you won?
I couldn't afford to lose.
How did you beat this Blue Devil of yours?
I showed him I could endure him, and made him respect my endurance.
How?
Just by enduring. Endurance is something that spooks and blue devils respect. And they respect all the tricks that panicky people use to outwit and outlast their panic.
Like taking a few deep breaths.
Or rum cocos. Or even Beach Boys. Anything, everything we do to give them the slip and so keep on going.
To where?
To somewhere like this, perhaps. After long and difficult travels. The subterranean travels that the spooked and bedeviled take through the unlighted sides of their own natures until finally they see a faint grey light and keep climbing towards it.
You still following that faint grey light?
Oh, any light's a good light to see by at the end of a long, dark tunnel that you thought would be never-ending. That only God or death could put a stop to. Especially when you... Since I was far from sure about God.
You still unsure about him?
Not as unsure as I was.
I am not a crier, but I remember sobbing through that scene. I couldn't talk to anyone about what I was going through, but here was someone who was saying exactly how I felt. Here was a movie in which people suffered mentally, spiritually, emotionally, just like I was. It was an epiphany. There were people who felt like I did, and what's more, they were viewed as brave for having wrestled through their issues. Much of my own philosophy about mental illness comes from this movie, especially when Hannah says that spooks and blue devils respect all the tricks that panicky people use to get through their panic. I can actually quote the movie at this point. In her case, it was deep breathing. In my case, it's movies and fandom. The other thing she talks about, rum cocos and Beach Boys, is another way of saying drinking and having indiscriminate sex, defense mechanisms that we use to get through our panic. At that moment, I understood that life was a lot more complex than I saw around me in my small town. Tennessee Williams is considered one of the greatest playwrights of the 20th century, and a lot of his plays are based on his own experience. His father was abusive, and his sister suffered from schizophrenia and was given a lobotomy in her 20s. Williams himself suffered from alcoholism and drug addiction and was afraid his whole life that he would get schizophrenia like his sister. Even learning about the life of the person who had written this play made me realize that a lot of people suffer. It is so wonderful that mental illness can be talked about now without stigma. In most circles, at least. But there are still places where it's shameful and you shouldn't talk about it. But with the internet, one of God's greatest gifts to mankind, there is a place where we can go and find people with similar experiences and talk about our own. One of the things that has helped me the most over the last few years has been going to these sites and reading the experiences of people like me. And sometimes what they're dealing with is a whole lot worse than what's going on with me. And I admire them just for surviving. If you feel like you're alone, go to these sites, go to the Mighty, go to Write Love on Her Arms, and read what other people are writing. I guarantee you, you will feel less alone. And if you get a chance, watch Night of the Iguana. It's not available on streaming that I could find, but it is available on DVD from Netflix. Please let me know in the comments if there have been other films or shows that have made you feel like you're less alone. And this is what I do all the time. I talk about the power of film and television and the awesomeness of fandom and mental health. If this video helped you even a little bit, consider subscribing by hitting my little round face down there in the corner. No, or maybe it's down there. I don't remember. And please share this video with someone you think might be struggling and might be able to benefit from it, because that's why I do this. Because film and fandom are good for the soul.